"We will handle the client meeting," my manager said, sliding my laptop away from me across the polished dark oak conference table like I was a child playing with executive toys. "You are simply not senior enough for a deal of this magnitude, Gavin." The way Bradford Cole smiled when he uttered those words, that patronizing little twitch at the corner of his manicured mouth, made my stomach knot into a tight ball of ice. 5 months of painstaking research, 23 straight weekends, 80-hour work weeks, my proprietary strategy, my core mathematical architecture, and my 64 presentation slides. And now I was being completely erased from my own life's work. I swallowed the bitter lump of humiliation in my throat, forced a neutral expression onto my face, and nodded slowly. I watched in heavy silence as Bradford Cole, our Vice President of Client Services, and Laura Jenkins, my immediate supervisor, walked out of the room. They carried my leather-bound portfolio folders under their arms like trophy hunters displaying a fresh kill. Neither of them had contributed a single line of data or a single technical insight to this proposal. Yet, there they were, marching toward the executive boardroom with my work tucked under their elbows, having not even bothered to change the project footer containing my author initials. My name is Gavin Reynolds. I am 46 years old, a senior enterprise data architect with over 22 years of specialized experience in high-throughput infrastructure optimization and data integrity engineering. I am not entry-level. I am the person companies call when their multi-million-dollar databases are collapsing under exponential transaction loads. It is not glamorous work, but it is the backbone of modern enterprise business. When implemented correctly, my optimization models save corporations tens of millions of dollars annually in operational overhead. What no one tells you when climbing the technical ladder is that at a certain echelon, technical capability stops mattering to the corporate hierarchy. Corporate advancement becomes entirely about secret handshake clubs, who plays golf on Saturday mornings with the chief executive officer, and who can speak fluent corporate buzzword jargon without blushing. I was never part of Bradford Cole's inner circle. Bradford wore $3,000 tailored suits, drove a silver Porsche, and possessed a slick charm that made board members swoon. What Bradford did not possess was even an elementary understanding of enterprise software architecture. He could not explain the difference between a relational database partition and a dynamic load balancer if his life depended on it. The $8.2 million Blackstone financial account was not just another prospective contract for Vertex Solutions. It was the white whale of enterprise consulting deals, the flagship contract that would elevate our mid-sized firm into a recognized national powerhouse. It was the singular deal that would determine annual executive bonuses, trigger major promotions, and dictate which division heads retain their positions during corporate restructuring. Vertex Solutions had been aggressively pursuing Blackstone Financial for nearly 6 years, with zero success, repeatedly being rejected because our standard service packages could not address their complex latency bottlenecks. That all changed 5 months ago when I independently uncovered a hidden structural flaw within Blackstone's legacy mainframe data synchronization protocol. It was a subtle, highly complex timing inefficiency buried deep within their transaction logs, an anomaly silently leaking approximately $3.4 million in operational waste every single year. It was the exact type of invisible flaw that only someone who had spent 20 years dissecting low-level data packets could ever identify. "This is extraordinary work, Gavin," Laura Jenkins had remarked 3 months ago when I first presented my initial diagnostic breakdown to her. "This discovery could revolutionize our entire enterprise pitch. Let us keep this close to our chests while we flesh out the full architectural framework before presenting it to senior leadership." I had trusted Laura implicitly. She was a director who had recruited me from my previous consulting firm. I believed she respected the craft of engineering and valued hard work over office politics. For 5 brutal months, I lived, breathed, and sacrificed for the Blackstone proposal. I missed family dinners, worked until 3 in the morning in an empty office building, and powered through illness right at my desk while typing data migration algorithms. I authored the full diagnostic report, designed the entire zero-downtime migration strategy, built the quantitative financial projection models, and drafted a meticulous execution roadmap designed to eliminate operational risk while maximizing immediate cost savings. Then, last Thursday, the breakthrough news arrived. Blackstone's executive board, including their notoriously sharp chief technology officer, Sylvia Mercer, had formally accepted our invitation for a final in-person pitch presentation at our corporate headquarters. The office erupted into applause when the notification hit our inboxes. "Great work, everyone," Bradford Cole announced during an emergency department meeting, leaning against the mahogany podium with an authoritative smile. "Laura and I will finalize the master presentation strategy for the board. Only top-tier presentation standards will suffice." I sat in the back of the room, waiting for my presentation responsibilities to be outlined. Naturally, I assumed I would be delivering the technical core of the deck. The client's technical questions would undoubtedly be deep, nuanced, and demanding. They would require someone who understood the underlying mathematical logic inside out. Yet the meeting adjourned without my name being uttered a single time. Later that afternoon, Laura walked into my cubicle, refusing to make eye contact as she rested her hand on the divider wall. "Bradford feels strongly that we must maintain a strictly executive-level presence in the boardroom for this pitch, Gavin," she said softly. "It is an optics issue. You understand how these multi-million-dollar enterprise clients operate. They expect vice presidents and senior directors at the head of the table." "This is my complete solution, Laura," I replied, fighting to keep my voice calm as my heart beat heavily against my ribs. "How do you intend to address deep architectural questions regarding real-time corruption prevention during live failover?" "You do not know the underlying code protocols." Laura looked visibly uncomfortable, shifting her weight from foot to foot. "I will be in the room to navigate the technical overview, Gavin. You walked me through the summary slides, and I have your reference notes printed out." Bradford was very firm on this decision. "And what about your opinion, Laura?" I asked, looking her directly in the eyes. "Did you tell him that I built this entire project from scratch?" She squeezed my shoulder gently and offered a tight, patronizing smile. "Your time will come. Gavin, you are a brilliant engineer, but this is simply how the corporate game is played. You have to learn to be a team player." "Ah, yes, the game. The corporate game where the builders do all the labor and the talkers collect all the glory." The morning of the high-stakes presentation arrived under heavy gray skies. Laura asked me to remain at my desk on standby status, just in case the executive team encountered an obscure technical question requiring a clarification call. We both recognized the hollow nature of the request. It was nothing more than a token gesture designed to keep me from voicing an official grievance to human resources before the client arrived. From my workstation, I had a direct line of sight into our corporate division's centerpiece conference room. It was framed by floor-to-ceiling double-paned glass, allowing everyone on the main floor to watch meetings unfold, while remaining insulated from the audio inside. I watched silently as the Blackstone financial delegation arrived shortly before 10 in the morning. They were impressive, commanding figures clad in bespoke dark suits, exuding the effortless composure of individuals controlling billions of dollars in capital expenditure. Leading the delegation was Sylvia Mercer, Blackstone's formidable chief technology officer. She was a woman in her late 50s, with sharp gray hair, striking dark eyes, and an international reputation for being an intellectual buzzsaw who regularly dismantled unprepared software vendors. Beside her walked her VP of Infrastructure and two senior data architects. Bradford Cole greeted them in the main lobby with his trademark polished smile, offering firm handshakes while Laura stood half a step behind him, exuding practiced professional poise. They escorted the clients into the glass conference room. Printed leather-bound portfolios containing all 64 slides of my hard work were laid out neatly at every seat, complete with the embossed gold logo of Vertex Solutions. My name was nowhere on those pages. My identity had been systematically stripped from the documentation, replaced entirely by Bradford Cole's name as principal architect and Laura Jenkins as project director. 10 minutes into the meeting, I watched Bradford standing at the front of the room, gesturing expansively toward the projection screen where my data latency charts were displayed. 20 minutes in, Laura stood up to present my multi-phase migration timeline, pointing enthusiastically at my architectural flowcharts. 30 minutes in, I observed Sylvia Mercer, leaning forward in her leather chair, her sharp eyes narrowing as she studied the technical documentation in front of her. And that was the precise moment when a cold serenity washed over my entire body. My anger suddenly crystallized into absolute, icy clarity. They were presenting my work to the most important prospect in our firm's history. But what Bradford and Laura did not realize was that the proposal in their hands was incomplete. 3 days prior, immediately after Laura had informed me that I was officially barred from entering the boardroom, I made a silent, calculated decision. I went back into the master presentation deck and quietly excised the most vital technical component of the entire solution: the proprietary 9-step data integrity verification algorithm. That algorithm was the mathematical linchpin of the entire multi-million-dollar transformation. Without it, the rest of the proposal was nothing more than a theoretical fantasy. If an enterprise attempted to execute the data migration without that specific mathematical sequence, the legacy database would experience catastrophic data corruption within 30 seconds of live execution, resulting in tens of millions of dollars in permanent financial record losses. I had deliberately left the algorithm out of the printed decks and slides. It existed nowhere in the company database, nowhere in the project files, and nowhere in Laura's reference notes. The entire mathematical process lived exclusively inside my head. Sitting at my cubicle desk, watching two corporate parasites steal credit for 5 months of my life, I knew the absolute truth. The missing algorithm was my ultimate insurance policy. It was my ironclad guarantee that at some point during the presentation, the corporate hierarchy would be forced to acknowledge my existence. 40 minutes into the presentation, the inevitable crisis exploded inside the glass room. I saw Sylvia Mercer raise her hand, abruptly stopping Laura mid-sentence. Sylvia pointed directly at a critical architectural diagram on slide 32, her expression shifting from polite interest to sharp skepticism. She asked a question. I could tell from her hand gestures that she was probing the exact technical mechanism responsible for preventing cross-node corruption during high-volume data migration. Bradford Cole immediately stepped forward, flashing his winning executive smile as he attempted to offer a smooth, generalized corporate answer. But Sylvia Mercer was not a non-technical executive placated by empty buzzwords. She shook her head firmly, pointing again at the slide and demanding specific details. Bradford's smile visibly faltered. He gestured toward Laura, silently passing the torch of responsibility. Laura frantically began flipping through her printed portfolio, her hands trembling as she searched for answers that did not exist in her notes. Her face turned pale. Sylvia Mercer folded her arms across her chest, her posture hardening into icy displeasure. The entire Blackstone delegation sat back, their expressions turning skeptical and disappointed. Then, in a breathtaking moment of complete corporate exposure, Bradford Cole, Laura Jenkins, and Sylvia Mercer all turned their heads in unison, looking through the glass wall directly across the floor at my cubicle. My desk phone chimed silently, and a high-priority text message popped up on my computer screen from Laura. Gavin, conference room now, emergency. My heart pounded with steady rhythm against my ribs as I stood up from my chair. Surrounding co-workers looked up from their cubicles, whispering quietly among themselves as they watched me walk the longest 30 feet of my career. I adjusted my suit jacket, smoothed my tie, took one deep breath, and pushed open the heavy glass door of the executive boardroom. "Ah, here he is," Bradford Cole announced as I stepped inside, attempting to maintain executive control with a strained grin that failed to reach his panicked eyes. "This is Gavin Reynolds, one of our senior data analysts who assisted our leadership team in organizing some of the raw background metrics for this pitch. Some of the metrics. Not the foundational architecture, not the mathematical modeling, not the multi-phase migration blueprint, just some of the background data." The audacity of his minimization was almost impressive. Sylvia Mercer ignored Bradford entirely. She kept her sharp, penetrating gaze fixed directly on me as I walked into the room. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, her voice crisp and completely devoid of corporate fluff. Your colleagues here seem utterly incapable of explaining the specific data integrity algorithm that prevents catastrophic index corruption during Phase 2 of the database migration. The conceptual objective is clearly stated on slide 32, but the actual underlying protocol is completely absent from the documentation. Without that specific mathematical protocol, this entire $8.2 million pitch is an expensive, theoretical exercise that would destroy our live transaction processing. The conference room descended into a heavy silence. Bradford Cole stood frozen near the projection screen, his face flushed a deep shade of crimson. Laura Jenkins stared down at her lap, her knuckles white as she squeezed her pen. They were completely cornered, stripped naked by their own profound ignorance of the very work they had attempted to steal. This was the defining crossroad of my professional career. I could play the obedient corporate soldier, scramble to construct a temporary explanation, saving Bradford's reputation, and allow them to walk away with the contract while keeping me in the shadows. Or I could take the board and flip it completely upside down. I walked directly to the head of the conference table, pulled out the heavy leather chair directly opposite Sylvia Mercer, and sat down. I purposefully made Bradford Cole shift his position to accommodate my presence at the executive table. The algorithm was intentionally omitted from the printed presentation materials. Miss Mercer's, I said, keeping my voice deep, calm, and steady. It is a highly specialized, 9-step mathematical sequence combining low-level data packet verification with dynamic load balancing protocols. I developed it specifically to solve structural latency issues, unique to Blackstone's legacy infrastructure. Because of its proprietary mathematical complexity, presenting it on a standard slide deck would have diluted its technical precision. Sylvia Mercer raised an eyebrow, a spark of keen professional interest, replacing her previous irritation. You developed this algorithm yourself, Mr. Reynolds? Yes, Miss Mercer, I replied, looking her straight in the eye without hesitation. I personally identified Blackstone's operational bottleneck 5 months ago, and I designed every line of code, migration architecture, and financial projection model contained within the portfolio resting in front of you. You could have heard a pin drop. Bradford Cole cleared his throat violently, taking a step forward in a desperate attempt at damage control. Now let us clarify. Gavin has been a valuable technical contributor under our leadership structure, but executive project management. Mr. Cole, Sylvia Mercer interrupted, raising a single finger without turning her head to look at him. Be quiet. Bradford froze, his mouth hanging half open, looking as if he had been slapped across the face in front of his peers. Sylvia turned back to me, her posture leaning forward with intent focus. Walk us through the 9 steps of your algorithm, Mr. Reynolds. Right now, for the next 25 minutes, the executive boardroom transformed into my masterclass. I stepped up to the massive glass whiteboard, grabbed a dry erase marker, and systematically diagrammed the complete mathematical architecture of the migration algorithm. I wrote out the raw protocol logic, explained how dynamic load balancing prevented packet collision, and detailed automated rollback procedures designed to protect real-time financial transaction. Sylvia Mercer and her senior technical architects peppered me with complex, real-world edge case questions. To every question, I provided precise, authoritative answers, backing my points up with exact performance metrics derived from my months of testing. With every equation I wrote on the glass, I saw total comprehension and deep professional respect dawn in Sylvia's eyes. They were finally communicating with the actual engineer who understood the soul of the system. Meanwhile, Bradford Cole and Laura Jenkins sat in agonizing, helpless silence. They could not interject, they could not contribute, they could not even follow the technical vocabulary being exchanged across the table. Their complete irrelevance was laid bare before the entire client delegation, exposed not by any hostile accusation from me, but by the stark reality of their own incompetence. When I finally capped my marker and wiped the dry erase ink from my hands, Sylvia Mercer leaned back in her chair and tapped her pen against the table. Well, she said softly, a subtle, approving smile touching her lips. That clarifies the situation immensely. She turned her chair toward Bradford Cole, her tone dropping into a cool, professional register that cut like a razor. Mr. Cole, I find myself deeply perplexed as to why Mr. Reynolds was not leading this pitch from the very beginning, considering he is clearly the sole architect of this entire multi-million-dollar architecture. Bradford's face contorted into a pained mask of corporate diplomacy. At Vertex Solutions, we highly value all our team members, Ms. Mercer. However, our corporate policy dictates that senior executive officers handle client-facing pitches of this scale to ensure executive alignment. In my 28 years of executive leadership, Mr. Cole, Sylvia interjected dryly, I have consistently found that firms relying on polished corporate figureheads to deliver technical pitches inevitably fail during live implementation. I prefer to deal directly with the minds that actually build the solutions. She turned her attention back to me, offering a firm, respectful nod. Mr. Reynolds, if Blackstone Financial decides to award this $8.2 million contract to Vertex Solutions, will you personally be designated as the lead principal architect for the entirety of project execution? Before Bradford or Laura could utter a single word of protest, I answered immediately, "That is my absolute condition for moving forward, Miss Mercer." I could physically hear Bradford grinding his teeth together from 3 feet away. Sylvia Mercer smiled, clearly enjoying the corporate drama unfolding before her. "Excellent," she said, standing up from the table, "because Blackstone does not write 8-figure checks to middle management figureheads. We invest in real technical expertise." The meeting concluded shortly after with formal handshakes, but as the Blackstone delegation prepared to depart, Sylvia Mercer bypassed Bradford Cole and Laura Jenkins entirely. She walked straight to where I stood, extracted a silver business card from her case, and placed it directly into my hand. "Call my direct line tomorrow morning, Gavin," she said softly, ensuring her voice carried across the quiet room. "I have several strategic questions regarding our global enterprise systems that I would like to discuss with you directly." The glass doors closed behind the client delegation, leaving me standing alone in the silent boardroom. With Bradford Cole and Laura Jenkins, the silence inside the glass boardroom stretched for several long seconds. Bradford Cole's jaw was clenched so tightly that a thick blue vein pulsed visibly along his temple. His pristine executive posture had completely evaporated, replaced by raw fury. Laura Jenkins stared blankly at the mahogany table, utterly incapable of meeting my gaze. "What the hell do you think you just accomplished out there, Gavin?" Bradford finally hissed, stepping into my personal space, his voice trembling with rage as he kept his volume low. "You deliberately sabotaged our presentation materials. You withheld mission-critical technical algorithms from corporate leadership." I stood my ground, refusing to retreat a single inch. Looking down at him with absolute composure, "I did not sabotage anything, Bradford. I included every strategic overview element required for an executive deck. The algorithm was a complex technical mechanism that demanded direct expert explanation. It was a judgment call. A judgment call." Bradford's voice cracked sharp before he caught himself, glancing nervously through the glass walls at the curious faces of coworkers outside. "You made me look like an incompetent fool in front of our largest prospective client." "You accomplished that entirely on your own, Bradford," I replied, keeping my voice steady, deep, and measured. "I answered the client's questions, solved their primary technical objection, and saved the single biggest prospective deal in this company's history." "Is solving client problems no longer the primary objective of this firm?" Bradford slammed his open palm onto the conference table with a thunderous crack. "You think you are clever, do you, Gavin? You think playing these insubordinate games is going to advance your career here? You are an employee, nothing more." Laura finally looked up, her expression a mix of defensive anger and deep betrayal. "Gavin, you should have shared the complete mathematical model with us prior to the meeting. We could have prepared properly." "Prepared how, Laura?" I asked, gathering my reference documents from the table. "By having me write out an executive cheat sheet so you could recite my equations like a parrot? Or would you have finally granted me a seat in the room if you possessed the honesty to admit you could not understand the work without me?" Neither answered. They could not, because we all knew the absolute truth. I turned and walked out of the conference room, leaving them standing in their empty kingdom. Walking back to my cubicle felt entirely different than an hour before. Coworkers leaned out of workspaces, exchanging covert glances and silent nods. The corporate grapevine moved with terrifying speed. While no one knew the exact dialogue, everyone had witnessed the vice president of client services being silenced by a senior engineer inside the glass bowl. At precisely 1 in the afternoon, my computer display flashed with a calendar summons. An emergency executive review session scheduled for 4:30 that afternoon in the corner suite of Chief Executive Officer Maxwell Cross. The meeting invite included Bradford Cole, Laura Jenkins, and Nadia Wallace, Senior Director of Human Resources. The subject line read simply, Formal Employee Conduct and Compliance Review. 3 hours. That was how long it had taken Bradford Cole to mobilize corporate machinery against me. He was attempting to execute a swift termination for gross insubordination before client contract formalization could occur. I did not panic. Wounded corporate egos are dangerous, fragile things. But I was no longer the passive technician who had spent months quietly enduring disrespect. I spent those 3 hours methodically assembling my defense. I compiled a comprehensive digital and physical audit trail, time-stamped code commits spanning 5 months, raw diagnostic logs showing my initial discovery of the Blackstone anomaly, digital version histories of every single slide showing my original author tag before Laura erased it, and an archive of emails where I had repeatedly offered technical debriefs that were systematically ignored. I printed full documentation binders and backed up every file to an encrypted drive. At precisely 4:28 in the afternoon, I entered the executive suite of Chief Executive Officer Maxwell Cross. Maxwell was a formidable 60-year-old corporate veteran who had built Vertex Solutions from a small regional technology firm into a multi-hundred-million-dollar enterprise over 30 years. He possessed a terrifying reputation for ruthless efficiency, absolute discipline, and zero tolerance for corporate dysfunction. Sitting around the polished glass table were Maxwell Cross, Bradford Cole, Laura Jenkins, and Nadia Wallace from Human Resources. Bradford looked smug, sitting upright with his hands clasped firmly in front of him, clearly believing he had orchestrated my execution. "Take a seat, Gavin," Maxwell said, his voice a low baritone. His face was completely unreadable. "We are here to address severe allegations brought forth by Mr. Cole regarding your conduct during this morning's Blackstone presentation." I sat down calmly, placing my thick black documentation binder squarely on the center of the table. "I welcome the discussion, Mr. Cross," Bradford interjected immediately, his tone dripping with practiced outrage. "Maxwell, this is a clear-cut case of gross insubordination and deliberate corporate sabotage. Gavin intentionally withheld vital technical data from executive leadership, created an artificial operational crisis during a multi-million-dollar pitch, and blatantly undermined corporate authority in front of external enterprise stakeholders. This behavior warrants immediate termination for cause." Maxwell Cross remained silent for a long moment, staring intensely at Bradford before shifting his dark eyes toward me. "Is this true, Gavin? Did you deliberately withhold the algorithm?" I took a deep, steady breath and looked Maxwell directly in the eyes. "What is true, Mr. Cross, is that I independently discovered Blackstone's $3.4 million efficiency leak 5 months ago. What is true is that I spent over 900 hours building the complete migration architecture from scratch. What is true is that 3 days ago I was informed by Ms. Jenkins that I was barred from entering the boardroom because I lacked executive optics. And what is true is that the algorithm in question is a complex mathematical sequence that could only be verified through direct technical dialogue, which I successfully delivered when the client demanded answers." "Sheer insubordination," Bradford snapped, his voice rising. "He is trying to shift blame away from his own calculated misconduct." I opened my documentation binder and slid 4 identical copies across the glass table. "In front of you is a complete forensic record of this project," I said calmly. "It includes time-stamped repository commits, proving I authored 100% of the technical solution. It includes version logs showing my name was stripped from presentation decks 48 hours ago. And it includes email records proving that neither Mr. Cole nor Ms. Jenkins possessed any understanding of the underlying software architecture." They attempted to present a multi-million-dollar technical blueprint they could not explain, risking our firm's entire reputation for personal vanity. Nadia Wallace from HR quickly opened the binder, her eyes scanning the time-stamped evidence with growing discomfort. Laura Jenkins looked down at her hands, unable to say a word. Bradford's face turned a violent shade of purple. "Are you attempting to threaten this executive board, Gavin?" Bradford demanded, his hands trembling slightly. "I am establishing undeniable facts." "Bradford," I replied with cold precision. "The fact is that I built the solution. The fact is that I saved the pitch. And the fact is that without my technical leadership, Vertex Solutions will lose the Blackstone contract within 48 hours. Maxwell Cross leaned forward, resting his chiseled chin on his interlaced fingers, studying me with intense interest. "That is a bold claim, Gavin. Why are you so certain we would lose the contract?" "Because 12 minutes ago, I received a direct email from Sylvia Mercer," Maxwell replied himself, pulling a printed document from his desk drawer. Bradford froze instantly. "What?" Maxwell read directly from the printed email, his baritone voice echoing through the silent office. "Ms. Mercer has formally stated that Blackstone Financial is prepared to sign the $8.2 million annual contract under one absolute condition. Gavin Reynolds must be contractually designated as the sole principal director of implementation. Furthermore, she explicitly noted that if Vertex Solutions fails to appoint Mr. Reynolds to lead this project, Blackstone will terminate all negotiations immediately and exercise a direct consulting engagement with Mr. Reynolds independently." Bradford Cole's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Laura Jenkins let out a faint gasp. Nadia Wallace closed her notepad, realizing the entire disciplinary action had just collapsed into dust. Maxwell Cross slowly folded the paper and looked directly at Bradford Cole and Laura Jenkins. "Leave us," Maxwell commanded quietly. Immediately, Bradford Cole stood frozen in shock, his executive poise completely shattered. "Maxwell, you cannot possibly allow an employee to dictate corporate terms." "I said leave us, Bradford," Maxwell repeated, his tone dropping an octave, carrying the authority of a chief executive officer who would not be questioned twice. "You, Laura, and Nadia out." Now Bradford straightened his suit jacket with trembling hands, cast a look of pure hatred at me, and exited the suite, followed quickly by Laura and Nadia. The heavy oak doors clicked shut, leaving me alone with the head of the company. The executive suite fell into silence. Maxwell Cross stood up from his arm chair, walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, and poured himself a glass of water. He took a slow sip before turning back to face me. "That was an exceptionally dangerous maneuver you executed today, Gavin," Maxwell said, his expression unreadable. "In my 30 years running this corporation, I have terminated individuals for far less than what you pulled in that conference room." "It was not a maneuver to me, Mr. Cross," I answered with quiet dignity. "It was a refusal to allow my professional existence to be erased by men who built nothing." Maxwell nodded slowly, a faint trace of a smile touching the corners of his eyes. "Fair enough. But you must understand that intentionally withholding technical data, regardless of the outcome, creates severe corporate exposure. And systematically stripping qualified engineers of their rightful credit to feed executive vanity creates far worse exposure," I countered immediately. "It destroys institutional trust, drives away top engineering talent, and exposes this firm to massive liability when non-technical executives make promises they cannot operationally fulfill." Maxwell walked back to the table, resting his hands on the back of his chair. "You are not backing down an inch, are you?" "No, sir," I said calmly. "I am 46 years old. I have spent over 20 years delivering millions of dollars in value to enterprise corporations while hiding behind the curtain. I will no longer allow incompetent middle managers to use my intellect as their personal ladder while treating me as disposable capital." Maxwell stared at me for 5 long seconds before letting out a low chuckle. "Good. Because frankly, this company has grown soft with polished talkers who do not know how the machinery actually functions. Here is what is going to happen, Gavin." He leaned across the table, his posture sharp and decisive. "You will assume the role of lead principal architect for the Blackstone financial rollout immediately. Effective tomorrow morning, you are promoted to Senior Director of Enterprise Systems Architecture. You will report directly to me, completely bypassing Bradford Cole and Laura Jenkins. You will have full authority to recruit and structure your own technical implementation team." I processed his words, maintaining my composure. "And what about corporate attribution metrics?" Maxwell tapped his finger on the glass table. "You will personally review all enterprise software pitches moving forward to ensure fair credit and technical accuracy. Furthermore, in recognition of your foundational role in securing this contract, you will receive a 3% direct performance bonus, tied to the net value of the Blackstone account. That bonus alone represented over $246,000. Just ensure you deliver on your promises, Gavin," Maxwell added, his tone sharpening into steel. "If this migration encounters a single unhandled critical failure, this conversation will have a drastically different outcome." "Understood, Mr. Cross," I replied, standing up and extending my hand. "You will have a flawless execution. The next 6 months were a masterclass in professional transformation." Word of the executive confrontation spread through the firm like wildfire, completely altering internal dynamics. Bradford Cole was quietly stripped of oversight over technical accounts, eventually being reassigned to a meaningless internal administrative committee, a corporate exile everyone recognized as a slow demotion. Laura Jenkins was removed from managing engineering staff entirely. Meanwhile, I built a lean engineering unit from the ground up. I brought in Raj Patel, a brilliant lead developer who had been stuck in cubicle purgatory for 4 years, alongside 3 other exceptionally talented overlooked senior analysts. We eliminated corporate middle management filters entirely, communicating directly with Blackstone's technical team with complete transparency and engineering rigor. 6 months later, I sat in Blackstone Financial's boardroom in New York City, presenting the final phase results of our migration to Sylvia Mercer and her board of directors. The zero downtime migration had been executed without a single second of system downtime. More importantly, our optimized data verification protocol had outperformed original estimates, reducing Blackstone's operational latency by 32% and saving their firm an estimated $3.9 million annually. The entire Blackstone board stood up and applauded at the conclusion of the presentation. Sylvia Mercer walked up to me, a warm smile on her face, and extended her hand. "Exceptional leadership, Gavin. You delivered far more than you promised." "Thank you, Sylvia," I replied with a warm smile. "We are just getting started." Upon my return to headquarters the following week, Maxwell Cross called me into his office once again. He slid 2 massive leather portfolio folders across his desk toward me. "2 more Fortune 500 financial institutions have reached out to us. Gavin," Maxwell said, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction, "combined contract value of over $14 million. Both client boards explicitly requested that you and your specialized engineering team handle the structural architecture." I picked up the portfolios and smiled. "We will handle them flawlessly, Maxwell." He looked at me thoughtfully. "You know, Gavin, when Bradford demanded your termination 6 months ago, I was seconds away from firing you. But watching you stand your ground made me realize something fundamental. A company that sacrifices its true builders to appease fragile executive egos is a company destined for bankruptcy." That night, I stood on the balcony of my home, sipping a glass of bourbon, looking out at the city lights twinkling in the darkness. I thought about how close I had come to accepting defeat, how easy it would have been to stay silent, accept Laura's patronizing excuses, and watch Bradford Cole collect an executive bonus for work he did not understand. Removing that single algorithm from the presentation deck was never about malice or corporate gamesmanship. It was about forcing absolute truth into the light. It was about establishing that technical mastery, integrity, and hard work cannot be silenced when an individual possesses the courage to hold the line. To every hard-working professional watching or reading this, if you have ever been sidelined, silenced, or had your life's work stolen by corporate parasites, remember this. Your skill and your knowledge are your ultimate leverage. Titles can be manufactured by executive committees, but true expertise must be built through blood, sweat, and discipline. The truth always demands to be heard. You simply have to be brave enough to step forward and let it speak. What is your story? Have you ever had to fight the corporate hierarchy to claim credit for your own work? Drop a comment below. I want to hear how you stood your ground.